Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting inform me to order at 6:46 p.m. President Rosick has not joined, so in that case, Trustee Stokebrand, who is new to the Plan Commission, would serve as acting chair until that point. So welcome, Trustee Stokebrand. I'll do a quick roll call. I see Barbara Kiely Miller, Eric Couto, Therese Klein, and Trustee Stokebrand. So we have 4 members. We need a 5th for formal quorum. Based on
Trustee Stokebrand just mentioned in the comments that Sangeeta is joining us.
Oh, okay. Well,
we may want to wait a minute then.
Sure. I can pause. Okay, so on behalf of President Rosick, who has not yet joined us, I am convening the Plan Commission meeting at 6:49 p.m. I'll do a quick roll call. I see Therese Klein, Eric Couto, Sangeeta Patel, Trustee Stokebrand, and Barbara Kiely Miller. So we have 5 attendees present, which does form a quorum. In President Rosick's absence, Trustee Stokebrand, I believe you would be the chair of the committee. So if you'd like to take over, feel free, or I can continue with the role of moderator, for lack of better words.
Go ahead. I
Okay.
defer. I defer.
Sure, nope, not a problem. And so the first item on the agenda for tonight is the approval of the February 25th, 2020 meeting minutes that were included within your packet. Is there any motions on the table?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
I have Eric Couto moving to approve and Barbara Kiely Miller seconding. Is there any discussion?
I'll abstain because I wasn't there.
No.
No.
Okay, hearing no discussion, I'll do a roll call vote of those I see present. Barbara Kiely Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Abstain.
Sangeeta Patel,
Aye.
Therese Klein, Therese,
I don't know if she can hear you.
Oh, I got some internet connection coming and going. Aye.
okay, Eric Couto.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes pass 4-0. We'll move on to item number 3, which is discussion and recommendation of a consultant selection for the comprehensive plan update. So within your packet, I've provided the history of the discussion of the comprehensive plan. As you'll note, it was chosen as an initiative by the village board for implementation this year. We reviewed an RFP for the consultant process back in January, which the Plan Commission recommended to the board for approval. The board subsequently did approve that RFP. Of note, the RFP looked to share responsibilities of the update between existing village staff utilizing plans that we already have on file and consultant. The consultant would take the lead on 3 chapters: issues and opportunities, land use, and intergovernmental cooperation. So with that, we did publish that RFP. Results were received in April or March, sorry, I'm blanking on that, but we did delay by 1 month due to some COVID stuff. So we're delayed 1 month on the review of that, but we did have an interview panel set up. It was myself and Trustee Stokebrand who were able to attend. Village Manager Ewald and President Rosick were also on the panel, but it happened to be on the day when the Supreme Court order broke. And so unfortunately they had other teleconferences that intervened with their ability to participate. So both myself and Trustee Stokebrand did have the interviews last Thursday. Both consultant responses are in your packet for your review and any questions that you might have. Trustee Stokebrand and I did fill out a score sheet based on the criteria within the RFP. There were 6 categories. Plus we added a category for the interview quality, just how the interviews went down. We did independently score them and we came up with the same result. I'd be happy to share the result of what we came with either now, or I'd open up for discussion if you want to go with your stuff first, or I could tell you what our summary was. I'll leave that up to you guys to let me know what you'd like to proceed with.
Personally, I'd rather hear what you and Trustee Stokbrand have to say first, because you may answer some questions that I noted while reading them.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods, so having no objections to that. The two proposals were received from JSD and Vanderwall. Like I said, we did score them based on the categories of quality and content of the proposal, experience and technical competence, familiarity of the consultant with the types of issues encountered on a project like this, an understanding of their approach to our project, the interview, the timeline, and the cost. With that, the average score for JSD came in at 86 out of 100, and the average score for Vanderwall came in at 92.75. So Vanderwall was the selection of the score sheet. The notes provided within there for the reasons why Vanderwall got higher scores related to their experience in this area geographically. They've done North Shore comprehensive planning in the past, and they have a wide base of Wisconsin comprehensive planning experience. They clearly specified the project task and responsible person for it. They have a small team that would do most of the work with us. As I mentioned, it's projected that village staff would do 2/3 of the chapters and they would do the other third. So they've done plans like that in the past with staff. And so that was highly valuable, at least to myself as the person working with them. JSD had not provided similar experience. Vanderwall also understood the concept of a second generation plan, knowing that many communities in Wisconsin have done this, 10 years ago. There's no need to repeat what we did 10 years ago. There's a more of a desire to reconfirm and reestablish some things. So they discussed the concept of a second generation plan. They also discussed an ability to acknowledge controversial projects. So they discussed how, a redevelopment might have impacted a community's views on certain things. And as we're looking to discuss our land use, I at least felt that was a highly valuable quality. They mentioned being able to tackle that conversation as opposed to ignoring it. So I thought they scored well in their interview by discussing that. There was nothing necessarily wrong with JSD, I'll say that much. Unfortunately, they lost their project lead. So in between the time of submitting their application or their proposal and the interview, their project lead had taken a different job. And so they lost some lead experience on that they had replaced with a different member of the team. They did not have a lot of Wisconsin comp planning experience, a lot of master planning experience. Master plans are more physical in nature, so they'll discuss a redevelopment or a new kind of subdivision or a park layout, but not necessarily as much in terms of aspirational goals and things like that. So their experience wasn't as similar, in my opinion. And then they did have 2 landscape architects on their team, which are great qualities to have, and I'm sure we could find a way to utilize them. But like I said, that's more of a physical planning activity as opposed to a comprehensive planning activity. So with that, both Trustee Stokbrand and I scored them, and our result back with a preferred recommendation to the village board of moving forward with the proposal of Vanderwall. So if there's any questions on my rambling thoughts there, feel free to jump in, or discussion points. I'll be happy to participate and try to answer what I can. Dan Whitland is doing this.
Bart, the person who left from JDS, was that Amanda Arnold, who was the senior planner?
Yes, correct.
She'd only been with the company since this year. So that was one concern that I had, that she hadn't been with them for very long.
And my memory is she might have come from Minneapolis as well. I thought she had a legitimate background in comprehensive planning. So I think she would have been a strong member of the team. But yeah, maybe her experience with the company might not have been that long.
One thing I did like about them was that one of their team members had done historical planning, which has, in the last year or two become important. We had it listed as one of our priorities a couple of years ago, and the village board last year became interested in it with, the property on Lake Drive that was going to be replaced. So that, I thought that was a plus. One of the things I didn't like from the Vanderweller, and I think sometimes these proposals are misleading because they probably use the same boilerplate language for more than one community, was that where they started off talking about, you know, redevelopment opportunities and infill and, you know, dealing with real estate people versus, you know, what do the residents want? And because we're so small, you know, it's not like working on Brookfield or Greenfield or, you know, one of the larger cities that they've had experience with. But it sounds like that's the kind of thing that in a conversation that they would know what our priorities are versus what might just work for somebody else.
Yeah, and Trustee Stokebrand can correct me. I forget, I think Vanderwall referenced a Lake Geneva. Was it Lake Geneva that had a controversial project and how they knew that was kind of in the air? And so they decided their first meeting would be to just talk about it and get everyone's opinions on that matter out of the way, so they understood where they're coming from, not ignore it, you know, tackle it straight on so that they can understand how that would work. And I think for our land use chapter, in which, you know, building height and densities and things will come up, I think that that's a valuable experience, you know, skills that they can provide. So, but yeah, JSD did have a lot more, well, I shouldn't say a lot more. They emphasized a lot more physical stuff. So, right, whether it's historic preservation or a master park plan. So,
right,
aspect of it as opposed to the, you know, goal setting kind of stuff. I felt like that was perhaps stronger in the Vanderwall comprehensive planning team.
okay. Well, that's good because, you know, since the current plan was done 10 years ago, we've had a lot of development, you know, redevelopment projects since then. And so I think we'll need to review the lessons we've learned from them, you know, what worked, what didn't, what were maybe some unintended consequences, which we heard about during the traffic and parking study last year. So as, you know, as long as, you know, if you read the Central Business District Master Plan, the previous village manager and your predecessor, Bart, you know, kind of identified all these properties in Shorewood, which they thought were underutilized space that we could get rid of and have somebody build something new and bigger. And it sounded when I was reading their proposal that they wanted to do the same thing. Like, you know, they would identify redevelopment opportunities for underutilized space. And so that, you know, gave me a little pause. I just thought, you know, let's not go crazy with that and just maybe take a step back and see, you know, what is our vision now that we've done all these other projects? What works, what doesn't, what do the residents like?
Yeah, that's a good point. I did actually have a mental note on that too, that we didn't ask for the identification of redevelopment opportunities. That probably is more of a standard boiler thing that other communities are interested in. So, you know, setting expectations on our land use discussion will be a key component of, you know, the introduction to the project. So that, but point well taken.
Okay. I did like that they addressed how to do online participation, you know, which is kind of a real issue for many people these days. Those who would not feel comfortable going to the village center for an in-person meeting. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, and both teams did do virtual interviews with us, you know, so they showed the capability of doing that. I thought Vanderwall's went a little more smoothly. Obviously, you know, they were pretty comparable, but in terms of screen sharing and stuff, they seemed, you know, pretty up to speed on all that stuff. So they already have the capabilities of doing that.
Bart, one thing I noticed with Vanderwall, they have somebody who is involved with GIS mapping, which I had to Google today, but that they suggested that the village use your own GIS consultant and they would just advise. So does that mean there would be a cost would go above that 30,000 then that the village board has approved?
So the village, we already have a GIS consultant on, you know, on contract. And so part of that is part of their actual contract. And so if for some reason the plan commission or the board or someone wants maps, extensively beyond what is typical, correct, costs could go up on that, but that would be a special ask, I would say. We're looking at the minimum requirements for the mapping on that.
Hey, Barton, this is Dan. I apologize. I was late. I'm assuming Commissioner Couto is the one that sabotaged my internet, so I apologize if that caused a problem.
He did mention that, so not a problem. So if there's no further discussion, I believe the agenda is just written as a discussion, a recommendation. So there's no need to formally consider it. However, I would like to get some sort of consensus from the plan commissioners present as to whether or not the review panel of myself and Trustee Stokebrand, if that recommendation would be something to pass along to the board. I would entertain a motion if you're willing to give one, but it's not required based on how the agenda was drafted. So I'll leave it to the commission.
Bart, I have one other question for you. What will the role of the plan commission be with the consultant? Besides, I saw it's mentioned when they're going to have a presentation, but besides staff involvement, will we have a committee or of commissioners, maybe residents who are working with them?
Yeah, I would expect the plan commission to have monthly meetings at their regular time, if not in between, specific to the progress of the chapters. And so I would expect the plan commission to be the first level of review prior to any sort of, formal presentation of that, to make sure that you're all on the same board with it. So that role will be defined in the introductory meeting when we meet with them. If the board does go with Vandewaal, I believe they identified weekly updates to me as the project lead, but I would assume a monthly check-in with the plan commission would also be part of that, if not a different time frame. But you definitely will be involved with the review of all materials prior to it going to a larger audience.
Okay, good. Yeah, my only concern was that if we're not seeing stuff until their first draft, we'll be like, wait a minute, that's not at all the direction we wanted to go, that we'd be, spending more money and more time than we need to. So I just want to make sure that we're involved all along.
Yeah, and the budget and their participation might not allow for them to formally present all of that stuff to you, but it definitely will at least come through me. In regular meetings or in special meetings specific to the comp plan. But yeah, I can't do this by myself. They can't do it by themselves. So we definitely want to lean on your expertise and your knowledge of the community to help us with that. So point well taken as well.
Okay, thanks so much.
I will just add, I did make a couple, I don't know if Bart, I made a couple of phone calls to people on their reference list, and one was a person at the city of Greenfield that Bart knows from his planning career. And she said that they were very happy with what happened. They thought that they asked for a basic update on their comprehensive plan, and Vandewaal more than exceeded their expectations. And she said that if we had had the money and the time, she felt they were completely capable of going beyond and looking deeper and broader than they wanted. So it's not like they exceeded expectations. And I also spoke with a gentleman from the city of Brookfield who spoke highly also. Of course, these are references in their materials, so you wouldn't expect otherwise. But I specifically asked him about the land use, the intergovernmental component, and the issues and opportunities. And he also reiterated, obviously they have, they're not built up like we are, but he said that they worked very well, especially with the intergovernmental component.
Sorry, we're at the #1 restaurant.
They helped with drawing out discussions with different governmental units, which I think would be really good for Shorewood to reach out. He talked about sewer packs, school districts, neighboring municipalities, the CDA. he thought the coordination that Vanderwall did with among those groups helped move their update along a lot better than it would have without. He spoke very highly of Jackie Mitch, the main contact person. She's very organized, works well with others, thinks about the next step always, but is practical, and she helps to use dollars wisely. And so I think this Jackie Mitch and Meredith Perks would be the two individuals that Bart would be working the most closely with, which is nice because the other, I think JSD had four people involved. And he spoke very highly about their responsiveness too. So.
I'm okay making the recommendation. I mean, do you need us to make a motion? What's the preference of the committee? I can go either way.
I would personally prefer it just because it's a nice documentation of the conversation as opposed to, you know, general comments in the minutes. But like I said, we did not agendize it as a consideration. So if you're not willing to make one, you don't have to, but I would prefer it.
So we could vote on a motion even if it doesn't say consideration of.
I would say yes. It's just going to be for documentation purposes.
Were the costs the same?
So JSD's
no, they were not.
cost.
Go ahead.
JSD's costs were $27,500, and they had itemized it based on you know, their staff and projects. Vandewall's was a $30,000 not to exceed cost, indicating, you know, that they would give us whatever we needed within that amount. And so it wasn't based on, you know, 10,000 per chapter or things like that. So there was a $2,500 difference between the two.
I did see that JDS's quote did not include time spent at a board meeting though, or presentation to a board. So that would end up probably getting closer to 30,000 then.
Correct. That's kind of why I also liked the Vanderwall approach of the up to $30,000. So that if we needed them to attend another meeting, it wouldn't be invoiced separately. It was something that they were willing to do as part of the full project. So just being the person to process those invoices and to make those requests, I like to have, you know, that approach better than, you know, how much will it cost you? I'm getting a call from Nathan, so we'll just ignore that. But yeah, there was a slight difference in the costs.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm good with going forward with the Vanderwall.
I am too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a formal motion somewhere in here?
Make a motion, Eric.
That you wrote in the minutes? Or no?
I don't think there is one because, like I said, it was a discussion. I'd be happy to just do a roll call whether or not you agree with staff comments. But if you want to make a motion, that would be clean as well.
I'll just move to recommend Vanderwall and Associates for the Shorewood Comprehensive Plan update.
And I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, I'll do a roll call vote of who I see on the call. Eric Couto.
Yes, aye.
Sangeeta Patel.
Aye.
Therese Klein.
Aye.
Barbara Kiely Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
And Dan Wickland.
Aye.
Okay, so that we will take that recommendation to the village board at their June 1st meeting, I want to believe is the next meeting that they can see that on. So assuming that they agree with that, we'll try to enter into a contract so that by the June Plan Commission meeting, we'll have a formal update of the proposed steps. And if I need to get in contact with you in between, I'll look for an email. I'd be happy to do so. So we will get that rolling as best as we can. With that, we can go on to item number 4, which is a review of the 2019 Plan Commission Annual Report and future initiatives. So as the veteran members of the Plan Commission are aware, this is an annual report and initiative submission to the village board. The village board will be reviewing initiatives from all committees in June. And as we mentioned, the comp plan was one that you had submitted last year that was accepted. So, you know, your projects do get reviewed and accepted, you know, as time and budget allows. The annual report is found on page 62 of the packet. It's pretty general. It discusses the number of meetings and conditional use permits you've reviewed, CSMs, ordinance changes, some discussions that we've had on short-term rentals and special privileges, your role with the 2020 census, and then your discussion of the strategic plan survey that the CDA and village board had put out last fall. So just kind of a general report. I don't think I missed anything. If I did, feel free to let me know. We can still amend it. I think more importantly with this though is confirmation of the initiatives. So based on discussions that we've had in the past and prior submissions, I've identified 3 initiatives that I've heard from the Plan Commission, but if there are additional ones, this is where the discussion would come into place. Number 1 is to revise the off-street parking requirements. That's a continuation of discussions we've had with the transportation and parking analysis. And so that I believe the Plan Commission is just desiring to work on to, you know, to not require so many special exceptions. Number 2 is a review of the zoning map. Once again, that would probably take place within the land use component of the comprehensive plan. I kept it on here as a special project. If for some reason you don't get satisfied with the level of review, I'm happy to continue doing it, but I would expect that actually will take place within the land use section. And then number 3 was the request of President Rosick last year for the Plan Commission to review and update special privilege policy and ordinance. We had that discussion, I'm going to say earlier in the year, maybe late last fall. It's just one of those things that I have not had a chance to slot within my to work plan. So I'm keeping it on the radar as something that we need to do, but I can't promise that it's going to get done this year. So maybe in 2021, the board might prioritize that more highly. So with that, I'll open up to the Plan Commission to discuss either those 3 or additional ones that you might have. And Barbara, it looks like you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I went back and I looked at what we had on our list before, because there were some that we submitted that the board did not prioritize for us. And I don't know what your workload is going to be for 2021. You may not know yet, but so some of the things that that kind of fell off the priority list, we did the porches, we got parking. One was the historic properties and districts. You know, I saw the board had that down as a priority just to like educate. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to do anything further about, you know, having some kind of historic.
One was actually ended up being assigned to the village manager. So I know that
Okay.
has it on her to-do list and she'll bring us in as necessary, but I think to share the wealth of these initiatives, I think that one was actually assigned to her.
Okay, and then the other one was revising the sign code.
Yes, and that actually already is in my work plan. So both Design Review Board and Plan Commission had discussed that. So it's already assigned within my work plan, so it wouldn't need to be reconfirmed. It's simply a matter of me having the time to prioritize that. So it kind of always slips in terms of importance, but it's already been assigned. So there would be no need to have that discussion, in my opinion, because it's already in my work plan that I review quarterly with the village manager. And so she's always aware of what, you know, gets pushed off or what gets prioritized, but it is every quarter.
And lastly, we had research and revise conditional, permitted, and prohibited uses. I think we were going to do a big look at those.
Could you repeat that one, Barb?
Yes, research and revise, conditional, permitted and prohibited uses.
Yep, I would be happy to add that back on if the plan commission to throw that out there for consideration. It is something that I think could always be looked at. It just in 2018, I think that's when we submitted that for 2019. It wasn't selected
Right.
for a reason, so there's no harm in adding more to these. I guess just with the cautionary tale that only so much can be worked on, but at the very least, for historic purposes, we can keep the list accurate and full.
Here's another one that I don't think went anywhere. It was research/revise zoning code relative to site design standards. And I don't know if that is something that will just come up in the course of the comprehensive plan, or if that had to do more with, changing building height requirements. It's just been a couple of years, so I don't remember.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big discussion and perhaps budgetary item that I think we pushed off until after the comp plan was done, hoping that the comp plan would confirm the general aspirational goals of that, and then coming back to something like this potentially to write a form-based code or to modify setback requirements. So it was definitely something that was discussed but held off until the comp plan confirmed the land use goals. So once again, I have no problem with back to the list. I guess I just caution that I don't expect it to be selected until the comp plan identifies what it is, that should be revised in reference to.
Okay. And when our group was discussing our submission for that economic and housing survey that the CDA and the village board was doing, we had talked about having some kind of, comprehensive design standards for our commercial district, I think. So I'm not sure, again, if that was what we were talking about 2 years ago, or if it was more just zoning for building size.
I think they were separate. Yeah, zoning, in my opinion, is more kind of the nuts and bolts. Design guidelines would be more of the aesthetic kind of choose.
Just as a point of information, Barb, going back to the sign code, does that refer to commercial?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Personally, I would say there's nothing wrong with a list that helps you keep track of things, even if you don't act on them. Things to think about.
Yep, I definitely understand that perspective. Part of what we revised in the process last year, just for reference, is in 2018, this was a new process. And so a lot of committees submitted a lot of items.
Oh.
It made the board's discussion of them quite difficult, and they didn't end up picking anything that year because there was no way to do it. So last year, we kind of tried to focus it on things that we really wanted or things that we thought were needed or accomplished, could be accomplished. And so our submission last year was a lot shorter to help with that process. So, but it really is up to the committee. I think the discussion last year was submit maybe up to 3, hoping that you can get one of them, as opposed to submit 9 and confuse everyone. But
I have a question about the revised off-street parking requirements. Is it clear? I know our discussions are very specific to like every business that comes before us for conditional use and parking. It's because of the businesses. I mean, I know the village is overall looking at off-street parking, but I guess I wanted to be clear that we're talking about, I don't know if it includes both from our perspective, but I know majority of our discussions have been around the fact that so many businesses come to us for conditional use, and we're not clear if we're giving up, like if we're not accounting for parking properly.
so is the question, whether or not the requirements that we're talking about are specific to commercial occupancies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I just wanted to be very clear that that is an aspect of the off-street parking requirements, that it isn't just the general residential off-street parking, you know, that it's very specifically, that it's somehow specifically noted or addressed that we are talking about, because I know that was one of our biggest issues, is we don't know, you know, every time we give out a conditional use, it's not very clear to me at least, if we're sort of over budgeting, because we're always giving out conditional uses because of lack of off-street parking.
A special exception, I believe, correct?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Because we keep doing it, and sometimes it's multiple in the same building, and we're not, you know, after time, it becomes really unclear whether we've given out too many for that specific area.
I would say in general, the goal of the board is going to be to simplify and streamline the code. And so I think, wouldn't you agree, Bart? It was both residential and commercial. And so I would hope that there would be some guidance coming from the board.
Yeah, and we've discussed this one a couple times, and we've also discussed it within the transportation and parking plan. And so I think there's a general understanding of why it's needed. And so I don't think there's any confusion on that. But I think it's written in a kind of open format so that anything that might come up, whether it's residential, commercial, or otherwise, could be included. So, but yeah, I hear your point, and that's why we've kept it on here, that it does need to get addressed at some point, because I would argue right now the code is too strict requirements, which is why the special exceptions are required. At that point, it's just an administrative burden for everyone to have to do that. So if we can simplify it, like Trustee Stokebrand mentioned, I think that would be a big win for us all.
Well, a quick question: as part of the study, are they going to give us the total, like the appropriate total amount of parking spaces available, so that there's a number? I mean, so now, you know, I kind of agree with the other commissioners. There's sort of an arbitrary number that we talk about every time of needing 20 for this, or depending on their spacing. And I'm sure we've given, you know, we've double counted numerous times over the years. So what's the plan? What's the study coming back with? What did it come back with?
Yeah, so I did push them for an actual recommendation on that, and they weren't, I don't know, comfortable in one. They mentioned that was a local policy decision. Some communities are happy with commercial parking encroaching into residential neighborhoods because they like the vibrancy that the district provides. Other communities want none of it and would require, you know, off-street parking for all of that. So they indicated that was a local decision. I thought
the consultants.
Yeah, my expectation was that they would research, you know, what we as the community wanted and provide us with a recommendation. I did not get a recommendation within that. So at this point, it would be up to me and you as the Plan Commission perhaps to review what we currently have and modify that based on best practice, which ultimately exempts requirements for certain types of uses, but then requires it for specific other ones. So when you build a new 4-story apartment building, in that case, providing parking probably makes more sense than when you're retrofitting a vacant tenant space into a gym, and then we require 20 parking spaces for that based on your occupancy. So,
but if there are no guidelines or no recommendations, then how do you ever say no? And what do you fall back on to say we have run out of viable parking options in this particular area? I mean, at that point, it would just be sort of a continuation or a free-for-all, really.
Right.
Yeah, Eric is right. And the guidelines that we have now, Erica had told us several years ago that was just like, you know, some boilerplate policy that the village adopted. It wasn't crafted for our particular needs.
Yeah, they're often copied and pasted from somewhere else, and if they're 30 years old, they don't acknowledge the value of walkable urban, you know, commercial districts. So we would have to come up with our own recommendations is what I'm suggesting. And I think the problem that I have with the current regulations is that they're based on commercial occupancy in the renovation of a space. And so you could move into a space that has no parking, but not make any changes, and there's no parking requirements that are required. But if you renovate a space that was an office into a gym, then our code triggers that, and then you have to find 20 parking spaces. That's clearly cost prohibitive for a gym to come up with 20 off-street parking spaces. So you, as the plan commission, I would agree, have, you know, given the exception to that, saying that that requirement makes no sense. But at some time you have to fix that part of the code, otherwise it's too much.
I mean, maybe it does make sense. We just don't know. I mean, maybe at some point there is a saturation point. We just couldn't. I couldn't. I don't feel comfortable saying it's too much because there are no guidelines.
Well,
I think my
current
question
code
is the trigger.
take into account the fact that we have no public parking structures?
It does not take into account shared public parking, no. The problem,
It seems relevant, doesn't it?
correct. And there are ways to take into account the number of off-street available within X feet. You could look at that way. You could look at the number of off-street public parking within X feet or on that block. My biggest problem is the trigger for this review. So like I'm saying, you can move in, a restaurant can move into a different space. The trigger right now is the renovation of the space into a different occupancy category.
Mm-hmm.
What we end up doing is penalizing, for lack of a better word, the fitness studios that are renovating a space to become a new fitness studio. I'm not saying it's not right that there should be a review of the parking, but we're only reviewing parking for fitness studios. We're not reviewing it for a restaurant. You know, so Taco, which was formerly the Ruckus, there was a big discussion over that. I believe they're supposed to be in the parking ramp across the street. But now when Hayataco moves in, there's no rediscussion of that because it's already been, you know, out there. Trying to think of other, because that one kind of was.
Oh, that's good because we also had the conversation about Casa Corazon, and it was, you know, and someone was contemplating them using the public parking at Metro Market, but that it was full or that they weren't able to. And so, you know, like I'm 100% sure how many public parking spaces are available in that structure. And so, you know, I agree with you. If we're, as opposed to doing it sort of piecemeal, and only if an occupancy permit changes or a use permit changes, I have no problem doing it for all of them. I mean, if you're going to change it, then let's change it and enforce it universally, or let's not enforce it at all. I mean, but I agree with you that sort of the half and half doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, there's a smarter way to do it for sure. So I like having this on there as our number one thing to tackle because it is something that's very tangible and would help administratively and would have visible impacts in the district. So
How are you specifically wording it then, Bart?
I'm going to change it.
Parking and transportation or parking permitting?
Or requirements, you know.
I think the way it's worded is correct. And I guess from the plan commission, we were, you know, like what my thought was, we were specifically talking about the issue of permitting and with respect to the businesses that come before us. So I just wanted to make sure that was a part of that, well, the way you've written it.
Yeah, so if we were to revise what's on there, the only suggestion I would have would be to say revise off-street or revise commercial off-street parking requirements.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it makes it more specific. I'd have no problem adding that to the title.
At one point, we're on to the next. One point I wanted to make is there anything new that we want to add here? With our new reality, there's a lot of home businesses, a lot more people working from home. I think there will be a lot of new businesses starting, so people want to have a business in their home. And does our planning, zoning need to change to accommodate that? I know previously we were talking about secondary structures and creating more residential places per lot. But now that might be that may be part of the future, that may not. So both those things.
Therese, now are you talking about not say one person who's a graphic designer and works from home, but somebody who has a business where the clients have to come and meet with them? So
Yeah, like a counselor,
Piano teacher.
yeah, anything.
So yeah, we do have a section in the code referencing home-based businesses, and I know that people ask questions on it all the time. There's a limitation of, one person per visit and things like that. So it could be expanded, it could be reviewed for sure, especially if home-based businesses are, the at least current, thought of the immediate future. Once again, I have no problem adding it to the list. This list, there's 10 spaces on it. So if you want to fill it up, I have no issue with adding it. I just want to temper some expectations of, at least prioritizing them in the order that you think might make the most impact for the amount of time we have to work on it. So I think it's a great idea. Similarly, you mentioned accessory dwelling units. That came up as a topic within the housing study as well. Expanding housing opportunities in the village. So whether that's under your initiatives or the CDA is the village's housing authority. So most likely they might want to take ownership of that, but it's in the zoning code. So you guys essentially would be the people crafting the wording that would, go to the board. So I think that could be a shared initiative between yourselves and the CDA, to review and consider expanding, housing opportunities in the village.
Can you expand on that? So it's zoning, so it falls under our responsibility. But how do we share that? How does that work out?
So I would argue, and this is just my opinion, that the policies and priorities of housing decisions would fall under the CDA because they are technically the village's housing authority. So if it was their priority for the village to expand housing opportunities, I think I would expect them to be the group that would be responsible for that decision. If their decision is, yes, we should expand them, one way to do that would be through accessory dwelling units. Currently, the zoning code, which is under your guys' purview, does not allow accessory dwelling units, doesn't allow bedrooms and basements. It doesn't allow certain types of cohabitation in the zoning code. So my linear thought would at least be the policy decision to expand those would come from the housing authority. And then that would get assigned to you as the, the overseers of the zoning chapter. So, but to me, it makes no sense to do them without each other's thoughts on it. So I'd have no problem putting it on here, just with the caveat that I think the ultimate policy decision should probably come from them.
But I thought Teresa was talking about businesses specifically, not housing, or would you have to zone them together?
Yeah, I think she mentioned two things. So I picked up on the second one. Am I right in that, Therese?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The first would be to review home-based business regulations that I had from her comments. And the second would be to revise the zoning code to increase housing opportunities as directed by the CDA, perhaps.
Okay.
Or the housing study, or however you want to word that. But so yeah, my running list would be to add the review of the conditional, permitted, and prohibited uses, to research, and I don't have the words, so I'll have to read Barbara's thoughts on this, the zoning code, the setback and form-based requirements, review home-based business regulations, and then expand housing opportunities within the zoning code. So I would be adding 4 additional initiatives, which is fine. That sounds great. I just want to confirm that.
Bart,
Yes.
besides working with us on the plan, I know you're the staff person for the CDA, correct? So, I mean, this all kind of depends on your workload. So are there any other groups or, village commissions or committees that you need to do work with?
I also am the staff
Because
person.
we can say like, oh,
Yeah,
we can say, oh yeah, the commission can do this, but all this stuff is coming to your desk. That may not be realistic.
Yeah, so I also do the design review board, and then I also do the technical advisory group for the transportation and parking study. So as Trustee Stokebrand knows, last night the committee of the whole did prioritize that I would work on reviewing and revising overnight parking, alternate side parking, and winter parking regulations. And so that's why I'm trying to temper this realistically with, you can pick 10 things. There's no way I can do 10 things. So if you want to pick 10 things, I just want to make sure that you put number 1 in your number 1 spot and number 2 in your number 2 spot, per se. So, but keeping the list running, it keeps me going at night. So just want to be real on what we think we can actually accomplish.
Okay.
So yeah, I would currently keep the revising the off-street parking as the number 1 thing, because I think that is something very tangible and valid to do. The zoning map, I would hope gets done within the comprehensive plan land use. And then, as I mentioned, President Rosick and the board had requested us to look at special privileges. So I know that they already had a desire for us to do that. So I would probably keep those 3 in the order that they're presented. And then the other 4, I don't know if you have thoughts on how to put them. I don't know that it makes a difference necessarily, but I'm happy to include them.
I would say the home-based businesses, it's really timely, but we might have to wait for the economy to shake out a little bit just to see, in 6 months, is the tower at NML downtown open, and are all those people working from their homes in the North Shore?
Right. Yeah, I would think the home-based, of the 4, I'd probably put home-based businesses next, accessory dwelling units or housing opportunities, second, the conditional use as 3rd, and the zoning code 4th. The zoning code would be a huge task. So that would be my current order of addition.
Bart, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Zoning code in general, how would you describe it? Is it woefully outdated? Is it perfect? I feel like we kind of punt this every year, and I'm just wondering how far we can go before it becomes a real issue.
It's woefully outdated. There's no doubt about that. I think my biggest comment on
You
it,
said that, not me, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm happy to own
I
it.
could say that for the entire village code.
I'm happy to own that. It is outdated. Most zoning codes are outdated. I think my bigger comment is, though, as a built-out community, it actually isn't referenced or utilized as much as you think it would be. If we had green space, or if we had a large redevelopment, at that point, it's much more important to make sure it's exactly what we want. We don't have a lot of, we have gotten a few knockdowns, to rebuild houses lately this past year. We're all familiar with that. But in general, we don't have a lot of land use changes that, to me, would prompt a full-on need to review it, or to throw it out and start over. But
Okay.
That said, it does need to get worked on.
How can we help do that without tossing everything else aside? How does that get done?
Can you do it in sections or pieces?
Yeah, I would definitely split it out between commercial and residential. I don't think there's much of a need for a large-scale residential review. Maybe a tweak here or there to maybe an alley setback or things like that, but I don't think, residentially speaking, there's much to tweak on it. That being said, it could be easier to tackle that first, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, commercially, I think there would be great benefit in adopting a form-based code. The form-based code would dictate the type of construction and storefront visibility and things like that, and how buildings interact with the public realm. I think that is a huge benefit, and it should be considered. That being said, that would require a consultant to do that. I and we couldn't do that by ourselves. We would need someone with the expertise in doing that. So I would suggest, if that is a desire, that it be brought up within the land use element of the comp plan, that it's a goal of the community to revise the zoning code. And if that is the case, through public participation and whatever boards want to review it, at that point, then we would have more more standing to say, look, it's in the comp plan, we should do this. And then, you know, if it takes $20,000 for the board to help us hire someone to get that done, I think that logically helps get us there by documenting it in the comp plan and then acting upon it, as opposed to, you know, acting upon it and having to educate us all what that means first.
Would form-based code for commercial development or commercial zoning, would that be controversial?
It's Shorewood, sure.
I was gonna,
You want to move that planner?
yeah, the intent of form-based code is actually to remove the controversy. It's more intended to say, because right now the zoning code says, you know, it can be 2 stories, but doesn't really tell you what needs to be in the front, what needs to be in back. And so then a developer comes in and says, oh, I want to, you know, make a building look like this. And you go, oh, but we wanted to have a storefront in the front. But nothing in our zoning code says that. It just says 2 stories, build it to the front of the property line.
I see.
This would say, you know, we want to have your main entrance on the sidewalk. You know, all parking should be in the back. Drive-throughs prohibited unless in this circumstance. You know, so much window space, so much interaction of sorts. So City of Milwaukee has it in several commercial districts. It's a very useful tool, and it's meant to cut down the controversy and make it clear what the community expects and wants. So
we talked about that though, the idea of wanting a sense of uniformity in the commercial district, and why that the form zoning would help with that aspect of what we were talking about. So we did have a discussion about that.
yeah, and not to pick on a particular project or anything, but you know, form-based zoning does work well when you're trying to break up a long building or a long block by saying you can't just have, you know, 200 feet of unaccessible commercial space. It's got to have storefronts every so often, and those storefronts should have some sort of unique character to them. It shouldn't be monotonous and things like that. So depending how you write it, it's intended to capture the goal of the community, and it's really a useful tool for a walkable commercial district. So I think we're primed for getting one.
Bart?
Yep.
Yeah. Reviewing that zoning map is kind of my number one. And I think one reason is that Attorney Baer explained to us a couple years ago, the state legislature changed something that if a developer or an applicant meets the whatever is in the code, we have to approve it. We can't disapprove it just because we don't like it. And I don't think that was in place when the mosaic was approved. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like the design of the condos that are replacing the American Legion post. But hey, you know, they could put up 4 or 5 stories there. That's in the code. So, you know, maybe the next thing we'll have to look at is if anybody shows interest in the North Shore Bank building at Oakland and Lake Bluff. So, you know, if it meets whatever the code says, you know, we only can do so much if it falls within the zoning code. So that's why I think we really need to look at the different zoning codes we have on the map, and what are the particular, what those codes mean. And, you know, do we still think they fit as they did when your predecessor and our former village manager, you know, made those revisions.
Yeah, my expectation is that that discussion should take place within the land use element of the comp plan. So I'm keeping it on here in case we don't get to the specificity you're looking for in that discussion. But my expectation is that we do review the current map and what that means, and whether or not we should create new districts or solidify or consolidate other districts. But yeah, or like all of Capital as one district. Should they be separate? Correct.
You know,
Yep.
it's, as you said, if we make the, you know, smart changes, hopefully then there will be fewer controversies in the future.
Yep.
I guess, you know, before we put a ball on this, I would just like to see, I've been on this commission a little while now. I'd like to see this commission just be a little bit more proactive on tackling issues like this. The zoning code, we seem really reactive. Sometimes if there's not something on the agenda, no one is coming in for a special use or special condition, then we don't meet. And I know that President Rozek has talked about it in a few meetings of just trying to start digging in on some other stuff. Obviously, we're not experts in this like you are, Bart, and I know that this puts most of the onus on you to get this done. But again, if we don't start taking bites out of the apple now, it's going to be 10 more years before anything really happens.
Point well taken. This is the stuff I like doing.
Sorry.
As you mentioned, I'm a planner by education and profession, so I have no problem supporting the goals of the Plan Commission. Just realistically, I'm also the head of building inspection, and I work for the CDA and all this other stuff. So I am 100% behind wanting to tackle these things. Trust me, I am.
I mean, to the extent that we can apply pressure as a commission to the board. I mean, if this is a matter of needing to spend resources to bring in a consultant or to update some of this stuff, I think it's important enough to the village that we get on that. And if that means we take positions that we want, the board to do things, I have no problem doing that.
And that's where this initiative thing comes in, right? They're asking us, what do you guys want to work on? We now have 7 things to work on. Trustee Stokebrand and President Rozek are on the board. They'll be the ones, parsing through all the applications, and it's possible that, 3 or 4 of ours get picked. It's possible that none of them get picked, but not every commission, not every committee is going to get what they want. I love your we'll see where it goes.
Squeaky wheel, Bart, the squeaky wheel.
All right, here's another initiative. Create a position for a planning intern so that you have some help. Isn't there a master's in planning at UW that you could have come and help you?
That actually was going to be a request of mine this summer, but now with COVID, cost concerns, I initially had wanted an intern to help both with the comp plan and with the implementation of the transportation and parking plan. That person would help me with, revising the code on parking, and then also with the comp plan. At this point, I think if I want one, it would need to be a free intern, which philosophically I'm not excited about because they're doing a lot of work, and they also need to, get paid and eat, have meals and stuff. So I'm talking with Becky about how we could make that work and whether or not the village is saving money elsewhere, perhaps that an intern, whether or not perhaps DPW summer help is down, that we could maybe use some of those funds for a planning intern. So I'm with you, Barbara. I'm still working that discussion. My intention was to have that hired by summer, but the last month and a half have completely thrown off, logic for that. But much appreciated. I would love to have an intern to help me out with these things. So yeah, where I stand is we have 7 submission initiatives: commercial off-street parking, zoning map, special privilege policy, home business review, housing options, conditional permitted and prohibited uses, and then zoning code review / form-based code discussion. So if there's any further discussion, otherwise, if someone wants to make a motion to accept those as the 7 initiatives, I'd be happy to submit those on your behalf.
I'll move to accept those 7 initiatives.
I'll second.
And I see we lost Sangita.
Uh-oh.
We were so close.
Right. So I do have a motion in a second. Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, I can take a roll of those present. Barbara Kiely Miller.
Aye.
Eric Couto.
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
Therese Klein.
Aye.
And Dan Wickland.
Aye.
Okay. If Sangita rejoins us, I can ask her to confirm that, but otherwise it passes 6-0.
She seemed like she was going to be an aye.
I would agree, but I don't want to assume too much. Number 5 is simply an update on the 2020 census. If you had a chance to read the packet, the primary note here is that the Census Bureau has expanded the collection period. It previously was to end July 31st. It's now expanded to October 31st. A lot of that is the result of not being able to go door to door for follow-up and to get those final people to respond. So our role as the Complete Count Committee has been extended by 2 months. Within that time frame, we also have obviously big limitations on what we can do to help promote that. They did ask Milwaukee County suburban communities to do a weekly teleconference with each other to discuss our response rates. I have those within the packet. You'll see where we stand in terms of our neighboring communities. One thing to note, we are, we have more rental than many of these other suburban communities, so we're doing pretty well in terms of our ability to keep up with them. That being said, they do ask us to try to think of unique ways to reach out to our harder to count populations, which include renters, seniors, young families, people like that. So in response, my first attempt is going to be, I had Crystal compile email addresses of all the multifamily property owners in the village to request that either they post within their lobbies or common spaces a poster regarding, Sangeeta's coming back, it looks like.
She did say, she just texted me that she lost a connection.
Okay, I just readmitted her, so hopefully soon. But yeah, I'm gonna send them a poster to put into their lobbies and or welcome back. I'll ask that they put it in their lobbies, or I'll offer that we can provide them a poster and or have one of my inspectors, install it for them. I don't know what kind of bump that's going to give us. I feel honestly at this point, if you don't know the census isn't happening, you're doing really well at living under a rock. I don't know what the lag is in getting people to respond. So I'm kind of looking to you guys if you have any thoughts on why people might not be responding and how we might change their minds or communicate out to them. But we do have now until October 31st to mull on this question.
Without spending any money, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have no budget in our budget, or they're giving us no materials or anything. It's pretty much all, pro bono work, what we can do to help them out. It does benefit the community in the long run, obviously. We want to have our numbers as healthy as possible to get, the assistance that the census does, provide in the end. But yeah, we don't have any local money to, print things or go door to door if we even could. So.
And we have no way of knowing where the hot spots are, to use the phrase of the month. Like what demographic is not returning them or anything. So we don't even know how to target. Like, do you get any feedback from?
Yeah, the only thing that we know would be on page 66 of 68. They do provide response rates per census tract. And so Shorewood is 4 census tracts. 803 is the census tract on the east side, which is primarily single family homeowners. And they have the highest response. So not surprisingly, single family homeowners respond, better to the census. Tract 804 is the southwest quadrant, where a lot of rental units are. That's our lowest response rate. So I think it's easy for us to identify that our missing categories most likely are multifamily renters. How to convince them to respond more robustly is a great question that historically they don't. How we can turn that around locally. Like I said, my first attempt will be to contact the property owners to see if we can get something posted in their lobbies, but they've already gotten a postcard in the mail. They've gotten the actual form in the mail. The best way for me to get them to respond is to allow the census workers to go door to door. That won't happen until August. And so we're kind of in a 2-month pattern where they're saying, hey, go get them so we don't have to in August.
So a lot of these are UWM students, aren't they?
Yeah, and the problem with that is you're supposed to respond to the census where your primary residence was April 1st. It's possible they've moved out and are in a new place by the fall.
They probably moved home.
Yeah, And or their lease is done, right? If they were only leasing that through the spring semester and then next fall they move into a different apartment, tracking down who was living there April 1st to get them to respond, I think will be a unique challenge. And that's why the original response rate was cut off at July 31st. The intention, I believe, was to have enumerators out on the streets in May and June, but that's been pushed back to August. So now we've got this 4-month gap of renters possibly moving and we can't find them at that point. So
Yeah, it's a tough year for this. And
yeah, they want us to get out as much as we can early with the limitation that we can't go door to door. So
Bart, is
Yeah.
the poster you're going to put up that last page that has all the phone numbers on?
yeah, that's the one that they're asking us to promote. There also are hundreds of other options on the census website that, provide more narrative, but they're asking us to utilize this one because they think it's the most straightforward one to use. But I could modify it if we feel like there's a better message to add or insert.
And well, I asked is those high-rise apartment buildings that are like behind the southwest side, like behind Henry's.
Yep.
There are a lot of Russian speaking residents who live there. And so I thought it was helpful that listing all these different phone numbers for different languages was helpful. I did take copies of that page and posted it on 3 Shorewood Facebook groups, but I don't, if they're not, if they're older or not English speaking, it's unlikely maybe that they would be on those groups anyway. But
Yeah, I think we've gotten the message to the people that typically respond to it. It is the challenging part to get it to those that don't. And if there was an easy answer, everyone would be doing it. So
Yeah.
Yep.
We're doing the best that we can. If you think of things, feel free to pass them along. Like I said, we're going to try this method of posting in the lobbies. Maybe that'll get us 10 more responses. I don't know, but it's worth a shot.
I have a question. So the tricky part for me when we did our census was you need to find that unique code, which comes to you on that piece of paper. So you have to, you can't just leave your mail in a pile and then, when you go to look for it, you're like, oh wait, I can't just do the census online without that code. Is there a way or helpful way to say, if you don't have your code with you on hand when you go online to fill it out, here's how you can look it up and some instructions with finding your unique code if you don't have access to it anymore?
Great question. I don't exactly know how it works, but in this poster, under the number 1 category, which says respond online, the narrative does say, if you do not have an invitation to respond, which would include that code, simply indicate that you do not have a census ID and enter the address which you're responding to.
Okay.
If you
Sorry, I don't have that right in front of me as we're talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be helpful.
So yeah, if people, take the time to read this, hopefully they can go, oh yeah, I didn't respond to that. I can go online and enter my address and it should work. I've never tested that. Like I've already responded, so I probably can't test it, but that is in there. So
Okay.
should work for people.
Highlight it somehow.
Yeah, it should work.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I got. If there's any further discussion on that, happy to take it now or shoot me an email or call me if you have an idea how to reach out to renters or seniors. I have been working with the Senior Resource Center, Elizabeth. They're limited in their interactions with people, obviously, but she has posted this in several locations. And so when we have the time, we're trying to get it out there. So I just thought I'd give you the update of where that sits.
Are there any community-wide mailings or anything that are going out? I'm sorry if I missed it. They're going out between now and then?
So there will be an article in the Shorewood today, which I believe is going out in July, maybe June. So I did ask them to put an article in there. So this information should be in there as well. So community-wide, that's the biggest hit that we always get. It's been in the manager's memo. It's been our social media. It's kind of repetitive on those things, honestly, but.
Is it worth reaching out to UWM or is that just?
So yeah, the Census Bureau, Milwaukee is such a different animal when it comes to this. They have their own, UWM probably has its own census rep by itself.
Oh.
Trying to get them. So because they're such a large factor, they probably have their own individual representative.
And so you are supposed to register, like my daughter's at Madison. And my husband filled out the form, but so I think he filled it out with the assumption that she lived here because it's her home.
Yeah, I don't quote me on this, but I think the census expectation is that if her regular address on April 1st, where she would receive mail and where she would sleep at night, would have been in Madison, that she would have filled it out at the household in Madison, whether that's a dorm or whether it's an apartment or a house, as opposed to in the Shorewood location where she's not regularly staying. So
Yeah.
there should, yeah.
It's like voting, using for people.
Yeah. Which means it's fluid for that age demographic.
And that's why they're hard to count.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably that corner of the village probably is always not represented well just because of the demographic.
Right. That,
I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I'm just saying, you know.
no, I'm as equally realistic as you are. That's why I'm saying I can send this out and maybe we'll get 10 more responses, but.
Yeah. I think you have to figure out where your time is best spent, and it looks like you've covered as many bases as you can.
Yeah, we're making sure that we respond and think about it, but I don't know how much time and effort makes sense to put into it because quite honestly, it's probably not going to change. So
Yeah.
just me realistically speaking there. So with that, that concludes my discussion of the census. We'd be on item 6, future agenda items. The only thing I can share right now is that I will be bringing back comprehensive planning to you. I would expect on a monthly basis. So if not in our regular meeting, through a public hearing or through an online, participation effort, I would just get used to participating in whatever efforts we have on that. I don't have any other applications on file. That doesn't mean they won't come in, but I think the deadline for that is coming up. So at this point, it might just be a comp plan kind of summer for us. So unless you guys have thoughts. Okay.
Oh,
With that, I would.
Oh, I have one thing. So Bart, on our, what were the things we were supposed to be doing for this year? The off-street parking requirements. Are we gonna get, I did not go to the final, I've been to so many transportation meetings, but I didn't go to the final presentation in the village center. Are we gonna have that come before us for review, or is it just all online now that we should be looking at?
So yeah, the committee the quote unquote subcommittee that would be referencing that would be the Transportation and Parking Advisory Group. The commission's representative is Therese, and so she participates in that on your behalf.
Okay.
If there's anything specific to bring back, it would be her and my role to do so, but they are the primary subcommittee to act on that analysis. As I mentioned, the board discussed it last night. They did pick it and direct me, and I accepted that to work on this year. So we'll be engaging that more frequently, but it is a living analysis that we get to when we can.
Okay.
With that, I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor?
I
Okay, well, thank you all for joining virtually. This worked well for me, so I hope it worked well for you.
It did. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.
Okay, everybody stay safe.
Bye.